I decided to do something a bit different in this video. This little guy here is a half-scale human skull on a pike that I made maybe a year ago. Welcome to Creative Making, my name's Pete, and in this video I'm going to make a 1:1 scale version. So you can get an idea of how big those skulls were. Here's one with the base, and the pike would go in there and through that hole there. I've 3D printed all the bits and bobs that I already need. So there's a base, I might have to come back to that. Cardboard tube for the pike, and here's a skull that I got off Bamboo Labs model site. I'll put a link below for those. So yeah, the cardboard tube I'm going to use for the actual pike. I'll be covering that with some epoxy dough. I'm a little bit concerned about the base. Might not be the right size, but I'll come back to that in a second. This skull is exceptionally good. It comes in multiple parts, just like that. There's also a jaw with it. So yeah, this base, the thing that I'm worried about is that hole there is big enough for this cardboard tube. But I am planning on sculpting over the top of that to get some wood grain, which will make it a bit wider, which means it won't fit into there. So I'm going to come back and rejig that later on. But until then, let's crack on, let's glue this skull together. It's pretty simple, just using some super glue. There is some big gaps you can see in this print, but they're mostly large at the front. I'm not too worried about that, and I'm definitely not worried about the gaps around the back because I'll be sculpting on, sort of dried out flesh and putting some hair on it, so you won't even see those. Just pop the top on there with a bit more super glue. And a little bit of zip kicker there just to get it going. So while that's curing, I'll move over to the base. This is Fusion 360. Let's just open the base model, the original one. You can see it's solid down the middle, so I'm just going to cut a bigger hole. I'm going to make a 50mm wide cylinder. I'm going to extrude that down and use that as the tool to cut out the hole. So there we go, got a slightly bigger hole now. Once I'm happy with that, I'll then open it up into Bamboo Studio. I'm not a specialist or an expert in this digital stuff, so those of you that are, forgive me. Let's stick some supports on this. That looks good enough to me. And we'll send that over to the printer. While that's printing then, let's join these bits of cardboard tube together. A single tube on its own is not long enough, so I just need to put a couple of inches on the end, so I just need to cut that bit off there. So I'll use my sharpest tool in the toolbox. Absolutely blunt as, yeah, whatever. So let's get the big guns out. Basically what I'm going to do here is I'm obviously going to cut this piece off, and then I'm going to use some small styrene tabs glued into the end of that. That will just help me, when I put them two together, it will just help it all line up properly. Okay, so we'll just snap this off and cut it up, make the little tabs. I should have really used hot glue for this actually, it would have been quicker, but I ended up using super glue and it was fine. And then that would slot into the end, just like that. I did finally glue this in with some hot glue, and there you go, it all lines up nice. Next thing to do is to sculpt the point of the pike with some kitchen foil. And I sculpted that and taped that on, and that's that kind of ready. I need to sculpt a wood pattern in now, and for that I'm going to use some Freeform air. So Freeform air is just an epoxy putty, super lightweight. For that I'm going to need obviously the Freeform air. It's useful to have a board on because it's a bit messy. It mixes equal parts together, and you want to mix it until it's equal colour, you don't want any streaks in there. And then you can just use it like clay. I actually ended up painting the card tube with a bit of water to help this stick on. As you can see, it's not sticking very well there. A little bit of water helps it bond. Ended up covering the whole thing, and this is what it looks like. Doesn't look like wood. While we're waiting for that to cure up, let's have a look at the 3D print. Looks alright to me. You kind of 3D printing experts would probably be screaming at the screen now. But yeah, it works. So you can see there, that's the original one, and there's that hole. You can see the little ridge there. And this is a new one with a bigger hole. That should be big enough to get the pike in there. It's a bit of a mess, but I'm going to cover it up later on. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to just tidy this up a little bit. I wanted to try and make it look not so bumpy, so I'm using that Japanese rasp. These things are a life changer, is that right? Yeah. I ended up using my little mini Dremel, dremeling all the wood grain in, which took quite a while. So that's it, bit of wood grain in there. It's not perfect, but once it's got painted and the skulls on there, it should look pretty convincing. So off camera, I filled some of those gaps in with a bit of Freeform air, and I'm just going to quickly tidy those up now. Not too bothered if they're 100% hidden because I'll be covering them up. Starting off with some 60 grit sandpaper, quite heavy stuff. This Freeform air sands really well, really easily. It's actually great for all kinds of things, sculpting and filling and carving once you've got a block of it. Yeah, it's very cool. So just go over those gaps there. As I say, I'm going to end up painting this and covering this with manky flesh. So I'll go on to some 240 grit now, just to try and bring that down a bit more, and then I'm going to use some Scotch pad just to finish it off. If you're not quite sure what Scotch pad is, it's this stuff here. So while I was doing that, I thought it'd be nice to take some of the teeth out. It looks too pristine with all those teeth in. So I'm just going to mark which ones I want to remove. And then off camera, I used my Dremel and I took those out, and it looks so much better. Okay, so almost there with the prep. You can see I've marked on the front of the skull there, a circle. That's where the pike will come out. There's also a mark on the back of the skull. So I'm just going to use one of these hull saws to cut through the skull. These things are incredibly safe to use, no problems at all. Okay, so here are all the parts then ready to rock. So that's the pike. There's the skull. I ended up cutting the hole out the front as well. Jaw, and of course the stand, and that little piece that I cut out. So there's a hole right the way through there. The little piece that I cut out, I'm actually going to cut that up and make kind of fragments of bone that I'll stick on so it looks like the bone's broken. There's the pike. And with a skull kind of roughly just put on there. So you kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. So there you go, that's kind of the initial prep. We're going to start off by looking at the base. You may have noticed this is the original base. I'll talk about that in a minute. First thing I want to do is I want to give this a coating of car body filler. I'm not going to sand out all the layer lines, but what I do want to do is I want to stipple on quite a heavy texture. I'm not sure whether this base is going to be metal or stone just yet. Either way, I'm going to texture it all up with some car body filler, or Bondo if you're in the States. With the original base, I was a bit concerned that the pike wouldn't fit because of the thickness of Freeform air that I was using. But as you can see here, I've not sculpted at the bottom of the thing, so it still fits in there. So I'll use the original base. I just need to fill in some of these gaps. Just going to use some tin foil to mask off the base. Using that Freeform air that we've used already for sculpting the wood grain, I'm going to fill in those gaps. So just use a little bit, equal parts, give it a good old mix as per usual. We don't want to have any streaks of colour in there, and then we'll jam it in there. Just going to use a mixing stick there, split down the middle to add that wood grain. I'll left that overnight. The next day then, this is all set. Just need to give it a clean up. So as you can see, I just use a scalpel there and my Dremel to redefine that wood grain. And then a wire brush just to kind of soften everything off really. The whole thing got wire brushed actually. And there you go, and it fits in nice and it's all nice and neat around the bottom. So happy days. So we're going to use the original base on this one. Back onto the skull then. I've already started to Dremel in some cracks and splits into the skull there. I'm just going to continue that a little bit here. As it turns out, you don't really see these anyway, but it's nice to have them in there. PLA is a nightmare to Dremel, it just melts. Okay, so I've got it on a nice sturdy base there, and a silicone pad for any droppage or spillage. And we're back onto the old Freeform air. I'm going to start to sculpt the sort of primary meat, dried flesh. I always split a couple of sticks down there as well, they might become useful. I've probably said this way too many times, but this stuff is equal parts and you mix it until it's an even colour. So I've only mixed a small amount here. It's also mass sensitive, so if you mix a massive amount, it'll gather up a lot of heat and cure super quick, so I'm only working in small amounts. You'll see me squirting some liquid on this. I discovered that using isopropyl alcohol helps this stick to the surface, and I can use a brush, as you can see me doing there, and some alcohol to kind of smooth everything out and also to shape it and sculpt it a little bit. I'll just continue to do this for most of the sculpt. Just using a mixture of the brush, the alcohol and those mixing sticks there. Once I was happy with the forms and the shapes that I got, I left it overnight. Here it is, all nice and cured. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. We just need to do the back half. I want to put hair on this guy, so there needs to be some sort of old meat there. So going against everything I said a minute ago, this is quite a big chunk of freeform air. I didn't end up using it all, in fact. I do want to have some visible bone at the back. I quite like that, even though it'll be underneath. Probably won't see it. Again, I've left it overnight to cure. You can see I've also glued on those shards of bone. A little bit more freeform air to kind of blend those bits in. This is quite a slow project because between the freeform air, it needs to be left overnight to cure. And also you'll see the stages in a minute. Everything needs to be left overnight to cure. So you do a layer, leave it, do a layer, leave it. It ends up being quite a long project. Time to glue on the jaw. For this I just used super glue, and then to speed things up I used a bit of zip kicker as well. Once I've got the position that I liked, and let it set, and there we go, nice and sturdy. So overnight I've put some more freeform air on there just to help lock that jaw in position. You can see I've put some inside the back of the throat as well. On to the next stage then. So I'm going to use PVA glue. I'm going to try this Mod Podge. I keep hearing about it, never tried it. And of course the old Mighty Strength kitchen towel there. First thing I want to do is mix up some of that PVA glue with some water. It was a little bit thick. I wanted it to be a little bit runny. And I'm just simply going to paint this PVA glue all over the thing. And then once that's gone on there, I'm going to laminate some of that kitchen towel on there. Turns out that kitchen towel was mighty. It just wasn't doing the job I wanted it to do. So I ended up pulling most of that off. And then moving on to just toilet paper. Toilet paper was a bit thin, although it did give some nice fine texture. So the final thing I tried was these. These are just water wipes that I've dried out. Turns out these were the best option, really. Also gave this whole Mod Podge a go, and I was pleasantly surprised, actually. The Mod Podge, even though it was quite thick, it was very good. I will use that again. For the next few days, I just went on with layer upon layer of tissue and water wipes, and you can see it's all built up, so there's a real gnarly sort of texture all over the thing. Some visible bone there as well. I wanted to work on the neck part. I wanted it to have kind of dried up hanging flesh. Put this on already just to give me an idea of what the neck might look like and where it might be positioned. I've also put some more freeform air in there. So again, I'm going to use this stuff. This is really great stuff, actually, quite strong. I've made these things look a little bit like white jerky using the water wipes and Mod Podge. I've just painted it onto some silicone matte just to make all these little pieces. I'm going to use those to kind of represent dried up flesh, meat, I guess. So here I'm just tidying up some of the edges. I'm going to glue all those on using just a little bit of super glue just to tack them in place. And again, as I say, this is just to represent dried up skin. Came back the next day, I didn't really like it. They all looked similar length. Kind of looked a bit like a court jester's neck frill. I decided that I needed to do some drastic surgery. I ended up cutting a lot of these off, actually, because it just didn't. Trimmed them all up, and then using this stuff, I kind of teased this out into just random ripped up bits of fluff. And the idea is I'm just going to kind of glue those on the outside of those hanging bits of skin. So in order to do that, it was just a simple case of using some Mod Podge, daub it all over. And then hang some of that stuff on there, or wrap it around there. Soak that in Mod Podge, and then I just used some little bits just to blend it in so there wasn't any definite lines there. And I much prefer the look of this, it's a bit more random. Once I got all that on there, I used a hairdryer on a stand and I just pointed at it and set it off and let it go for quite a while. So back onto the base then. This is all dried. I need to kind of round and soften all this texture off because as it stands, the texture is too sharp. I'm sort of leaning towards this being a stone base. I use these things, these are great, these are kind of scotch pads for the old Dremel. They're not too aggressive, so rather than sanding things off, it sort of softens things and rounds things. Softens things and rounds things. You know what I'm trying to say. So yeah, you can see the texture there is super rough. I just want to soften it all down a little bit. So this could either be a badly cast iron base or a stone one. I'm not quite sure yet. Let me know in the comments below what you think it should be. So as I say, I'm not trying to sand this stuff off, I'm just trying to soften that texture a little bit. So these things are perfect for that. And then I'm using just a piece of the scotch pad as well. So that's it pretty much done then for this episode. I was hoping it was going to be a 2-part series, but I think it's going to be 3. So let's just assemble the whole thing and have a look what it looks like now. Yeah, not looking too shabby. Cool, so the next episode then, I'm going to be doing the final artwork in. I'm going to paint the whole thing, I'm going to apply hair, hopefully get it done in the next episode. Okay, so where do I put that? I'll just pop it there. Okay, so these are the parts we've made. So we've got the base, the pike, and of course the skull. The skull is all finished. Looks a bit odd at the moment. Got all these dangly bits. Cool, looking good. There's the pike. These little sticks here, if you've noticed them before, they were just pegs to hold the skull in the right position. I'm going to replace those with little screws. And then of course we have the base. So let's start off with the base then. I want to do this as badly cast pig iron, so I need to spray that black. Yeah, so that's that. I'll finish that a little bit later on, but for now I'm just going to use the old base and a tube as a painting stand. Let's get the skull on there and let's crack on. The first thing I want to do with this is I want to give this a coating of kind of like a base colour, and for that I'm going to use shellac. Now shellac is already a really nice kind of leathery orange sort of colour, and it'll help seal everything in. So gloves on. Pour out some shellac and get brushing. I want to make sure everything's covered here. All around the skull, inside the mouth, eye sockets, all that kind of thing. And it was about now when I was doing this that I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had a funny little shriveled up eye to go in one of those sockets? So I'll kind of get back to that in a bit. But until then, get everything covered in shellac and then I'll leave that to dry. Okay, so the next day then, everything's dried. I want to start to airbrush all the way around. I want to get some into these bone colours and just generally airbrush everywhere. So for that I'm using these Vallejo game colours, obviously my airbrush, and there's the old little skull. So I'm using a selection of colours here, obviously a pale bone for the bone, and then I start to play about with browns, reds, purples, blues, which you don't really see at the end, but never mind, I know it's there. So I'm just kind of hitting all the low points and high points. And then eventually, once that's all done, I want to give it a clear lacquer to seal everything in. So here he is with a clear lacquer. It looks a bit odd, but I need to do that because of this next stage. So here I'm absolutely just caning on loads of black and antelope brown FW inks. And I'm squirting those all with isopropyl alcohol to make sure they're kind of spread out and look organic. Onto the eye while that's drying. Here I've moulded a medjool date, because they're kind of like shriveled eyes. I made a mould, cast it out, I've cut the end off where the stalk goes because it's like the eye's imploded or something. I'm just going to hot glue that in place. So while I'm hot gluing, I thought I'll just stick my finger in it because, you know, why not? And it is hot glue, yeah. And then I thought I'd do one of the best camera angles ever and seal the eye in with more hot glue around the edges just to hold it in place. Once that was held in place, I gave it all a paint and surrounded it with more tissue. And there you go, shriveled eyeball. So back onto the FW inks. Now the reason I'm putting so much black on this is historically these heads on pikes were coated in tar in order to try and preserve them. I don't think it worked. But once I got all that on, I used a hairdryer to dry it off. And then I was ready for the next stage. So it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I want to do some wet dribbles all over this. But before that, I thought I'd give it a matte lacquer. So I've got some matte acrylic there, some paint, and my big airbrush. So like an idiot, I mixed all this stuff up, airbrushed it on, realised I hadn't hit record. So you'll have to imagine me airbrushing the matte lacquer all over the head. There it is, it's lacquered and dried. And I'm using some UV resin and my torch. Getting the resin all over the place, and then I realised that my torch battery ran out and I didn't have any spares, so I put him out in the back garden in the sunshine and I let him just sit out there for a couple of hours. Right, so while he's curing, I just want to tidy this up because the next thing I want to do is I want to work on the base a little bit. So as I mentioned earlier on, I want this to be kind of like a badly cast, aged pig iron. For that I'm going to use graphite powder. I've already based it in black, as you can see. And the graphite powder is kind of what you got in your pencils. And I'm just going to brush that all over. Cover the whole thing. It kind of makes it look a little bit like dulled lead. And once I've brushed it on and I've covered everything, I'm going to use a bit of tissue just to sort of buff it up. It absolutely destroyed my mat. Nightmare to get that stuff off. Well, there you go. That to me looks kind of like a really blackened, badly cast pig iron thing. The next stage then, we're coming to the end of this project. We're getting there. Here's the pike and here's the holes. So I'm just going to pop these 3 screws in there. As I mentioned, these are just to hold the skull in position. And then I'm just going to do a really basic base colour, just a kind of leathery brown. I'm just going to cover the whole thing in that. This is a Vallejo colour. So once that was covered, I made sure that all the little nooks and crannies were filled in. Once that was done, I let that dry, and then I dry brushed some of this Createx kind of bone colour all over it. It's a bit ropey, but that's fine. This is just a base colour. I will be airbrushing over this once this is dry. So there it is in the stand. You can see here that I've kind of missed the middle out. I thought it's pointless doing that because that's where the skull lives. So I'm going to turn my attention to the base. I want it to be rusty. So for that I'm using a few different things. Oddly enough, ground cinnamon, some bloodline colour from Createx, and some more of this kind of orangey colour from Vallejo. And I'm just diluting all that down so it's really pale wash. As you may or may not know, when you do a pale wash, as it dries, it tends to go more transparent. So I'm putting quite a lot of this colour on there. This is a mixture of both of those colours, and then eventually I'll just put the pale colour on there. Bit of a mess, to be honest with you, but bear with me. And then I'll sprinkle on some cinnamon. And then here I'm using PVA and water, spritzing that all over to set the cinnamon in place. I'm going on with some kind of leathery browns there with the airbrush, and I'm streaking it from top to bottom and bottom to top. And then I'm going on with some darker colours again from the top to bottom, bottom to top. And that is pretty much the pike done. Okay, so let's move on to the hair. So the head is painted, it's all sealed, we're all happy with that. I want him to have some hair. So here's my box of hair. That's a bag of human hair. There's another bit of human hair. This stuff here is crepe hair, which you'll be familiar with if you do makeup or work in the theatre. The stuff that I'm after is that kind of creamy coloured stuff there. That is yak hair. So yak hair is quite, oh, what's in here? Nothing to worry about. To be able to sort the yak hair out, I'm going to use these. These are kind of the most dangerous thing I've ever seen. This is called a hackle, or is it heckle? Hackle, I think. I'm going to use this hair, and what I want to do is I want to use those hackles to kind of comb it all out and get it looking not so matted. So I've clamped it to my desk, and I'm going to whip the hair into it and pull it towards me. And what that does is it pulls out any kind of knotted, loose hairs. If you're not careful, it also stabs you in the knuckle. So if you do this, just be super careful of this thing. It's a terrible bit of equipment. I'll keep on doing that until the hair's all kind of fluffy and separated. Like that. And then we're going to just lay this hair on. This is something I haven't really done much of, so I'm kind of making it up as I go along. I'm going to use little bunches of hair like that. And the first thing I want to do is I want to trim the ends off so it's all even. It'll just make it a lot easier to, well, I think it'll make it easier to lay on. So yeah, just like that. We're almost there. We're coming to the end. To glue that on, I'm going to use the old Mod Podge. Plenty of glue on this. Now, I was making this up as I go along, so to start with I was trying to put the hair on dry and lay it on there in the hope that it sticks to the glue. It didn't really work that well, so I just, in a state of panic, I just daubed a load more glue on, and that seemed to work. So we did that with the next one, and then later on I realised that if I just put glue on the hair as well as on the head, it sticks together a lot nicer. So I carried on doing that. Didn't take long. I didn't put a full head of hair on because I wanted it to be all patchy, and then I left that overnight for that glue to fully dry. So the next day, here we are, it's all dry, it looks really ropey, you can see clumps of hair dotted about, and also it's white. I don't want the hair to be white, so what I want to do is cover over these clumps, and I want to give the hair some colour. For that I'm just using an airbrush, just airbrushing acrylics into the hair. I used a couple of different colours, and then I thought I need to have that messy, kind of poured out, dribbly type texture the skull's got. So here I just ended up pouring all this matte. This is actually matte medium. So I wanted it to get it into the hair, to get it all wet and stuff. I should have really worn some gloves for this. And that's pretty much it. And there we go. So the skull is finished. It's on its pike. I'm pretty happy with this guy. What do you think? If you like him, that's great. If you don't, move along. Put some comments down below if you like what's happened to this. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for sticking with me. The next video I'm going to do a giveaway, so make sure you're subscribed and ready for that one. And I shall see you probably in a couple of weeks now. So thanks a lot, everybody. Like, subscribe, and comment. Bye.